Hello everyone, I'm Anders Halsberg, a technical fellow at Microsoft, and I'm here to talk about TypeScript 7, the project that we just released. It is our native code port that makes our compiler and tools 10 times faster. The TypeScript project started about 14 years ago today, and TypeScript was always about improving JavaScript developer productivity by adding static types and then using those static types to enable great tooling. We've been open source from day one, and our community has grown really, really large. In fact, we average just under 1 billion downloads now on NPM monthly, and less than a year ago, TypeScript became the #1 programming language on GitHub. Now, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I ever thought that was going to be possible, I would have told you no. But it's obviously very humbling and very motivating for our team. Now, with a community that large, people write a lot of projects, and some of these projects are very large. For example, one of our sister projects, Visual Studio Code, is 1.3 million lines of code in almost 8,000 files. And projects like that can take a while to compile and type check. And let me show you what that looks like. And on this machine here, I've installed both TypeScript 6 and TypeScript 7 side by side. And I'm going to use the old compiler, TypeScript 6, to compile the entire Visual Studio Code project. And then we can talk while that happens. Now, from the start, TypeScript was self-hosted, meaning it's written in itself. And that was a great benefit to us in the beginning because we were using the tool day to day and was feeling on our own bodies, what was right, what was wrong. But it also means that our compiler runs as a JavaScript app. And that has brought about some performance and scalability problems. JavaScript was optimized for writing UI in the browser and not really optimized for compute-intensive workloads like compilers that we write. In fact, the most commonly reported issue we see, if it's not performance, it's out of memory. So about 2 years ago, we first started an experiment and then a committed project to move the entire toolset to native code in a language called Go. TypeScript 7 is the result of that effort, and it is by far our biggest release in a decade. Here's how dramatic the improvements are. We average about 10 times perf improvement. Half of it comes from being in native code, up to half of it, I would say, and more than half of it comes from having access to shared memory concurrency. And I should mention here that the speed improvements we're talking about, this is speed improvements to our tools, not to the running code. But you know, often projects brag about a 30% speed improvement, but 10x is truly a game changer. I mean, this is really dramatically changing the productivity when you're working on large projects. Now, it's particularly interesting, the gain that we get, I think, from concurrency. I'm sure you've all noticed that, you know, the free lunch is over in that Moore's Law is no longer giving us faster cores, it's giving us more cores. This machine, for example, has 16 cores. And, you know, the way to get faster in the future for compute-intensive workloads is to use all of those cores as opposed to just one of them. Now, TypeScript 7 is a port of the TypeScript 6 code base. It's the same code, the same structure, with the same algorithms and semantics, just moved to a different language. And that means our behavior is 99.99% the same as the old code base, which is great for compatibility. You should expect to see this work exactly the way TypeScript 6 did, minus a few little details. Now, let's try to go back and look here. And so compiling Visual Studio Code took about 50 seconds. Now I have, as I said before, I also have TypeScript 7 installed on this box. And let's try to compile now with, let me just say tsc-no-emit/diagnostics and compile with the native code compiler. And we should see this go a whole lot faster. In fact, it completes in about 6.5 seconds here. And that comes out to 7.5 times. Now you're gonna go, but didn't you say 10 times? Well, I did. And I'll show you where the difference there. But first, let me just mention here that in this compilation, every phase of compilation used concurrency. For example, all of our parsing, binding, and emitting happened concurrently. Each file was processed side by side with other files. And in the type checking phase, we actually by default spin up 4 type checkers and run them concurrently and have them each check a quarter of the files. And that's how you get better perf in that phase. But this machine here, as I mentioned, actually has 16 cores. So we can do even better. And so let me try to ask it to compile, but this time create 12 type checkers. So use like 3/4 of all of my cores for type checking. This, of course, will steal perf from other jobs running, but if there are no other jobs running, you might as well get them all going. And here you see we're down to like 4.5 seconds. So now we're talking about 12x. And in fact, this uses about the same memory as the old compiler did using that, but it took 10 times longer. In fact, one of my favorite screen grabs is this one, which is a 32-core, 128 gig machine, build machine, compiling a 15 million line code base in TypeScript. And you can see here for the screen grab, it's keeping every core busy. Now, with the old compiler, you would see one green bar here, and all of the other CPUs would sit around waiting. And that's what I mean by, you know, you get the gain from concurrency. Now, it's great to have faster command line builds, but of course, arguably the language service is what's most important. And let me try to start up Visual Studio here. The language service in TypeScript 7 switches to use the LSP protocol, the language server protocol. This doesn't really show up in day-to-day use by you. However, it means that it's a lot easier to integrate this language service with other editors, and increasingly AI uses LSP also to do semantic validation of the code that it generates. Now, on this machine here, you'll see that I have TypeScript 7 installed as an extension. Eventually, TypeScript 7 will be the default, but we are still, when you install Visual Studio, you get TypeScript 6, and then you can install the extension, and the two will coexist. Now, you can see down here in the gutter that we're currently using the native language server, and With this language server, pretty much every operation is instantaneous.
I've been running a Kubernetes home lab for over 3 years, and in this video I'm going to share the 5 applications which are my favorites of 2026 and which are having a huge impact on my life. Let's go. So to start off with, everything you're going to be seeing here is running on Kubernetes, and the first thing that you will see is my dashboard. This is called Homepage, and this is running as a container on my Kubernetes cluster. And this is basically my entry point into my home lab and my digital world, basically. And the first application I want to talk about is Forgeo. Forgeo is a self-hosted Git server, including hosting repositories and running CI/CD workflows. So it really is the full Git suite that you would get if you were using GitHub, for example. So if you didn't know, GitHub has been having some problems recently with lots of outages, and even if you look at the uptime of their actions, then you're going to see that in May they had several outages happening, with GitHub Actions just being down for over 3.5 hours. So GitHub has been making a mess of things recently. And the second issue with GitHub is, of course, privacy and sovereignty. Because if you don't opt out, GitHub will take your code and scan it and use it for training their AI models. So I wanted to move away all of my important stuff from GitHub, and I chose Forgeo for that. Now, there are multiple alternatives to Forgeo, for example, GitLab or Gitee. These are both alternatives that you could self-host. So I didn't go for GitLab because even though it is used at massive companies, as you see here, it does have more industry relevance, but it's also completely overspecced for what I need to do. And it is a lot harder to run and maintain. It takes up more resources. So something like Gitee seemed much more appealing to my personal use case. But then I discovered Forgeo, which is basically a fork of Gitee. And as I understand, Forgeo was created because they weren't happy with what Gitee was doing. So they created and this is why I chose it, private Git repos that I control myself. I really like the UI, how it looks, how it feels. You have full pull request workflows. You can do which is my blog. You're then connecting to a container that's running on my Kubernetes home lab, but this code is being hosted in Forgeo, and whenever I create a new release, so when I add a new blog post or I make changes to it, then I'm actually building and hosting the container image on my own local registry from my code that is hosted locally. So I own the complete end-to-end workflow for this, and it works really well. So Forgeo, I've been using it for 6 months now. It's having a huge impact on my life because it allows me to have complete control and privacy of my own resources, and I highly, highly recommend it. Real quick, application number 2 I want to share is called N8N. This is a low-code automation platform, which means that you can build these visual workflows where you define a trigger, and then you can do all sorts of actions with the data that you're getting. So one example that I have here is every hour, I will check all of the open PRs on my home lab repository, and then it is going to review those and see if it can merge that PR or not. So my home lab obviously is very advanced, and I have an automated updates workflow. So every time a new version of one of my applications comes out, I have an automation running that then creates a pull request to update that application. Now, in this case, for example, Miniflux, my RSS reader, it got a version update and then the automation creates a PR to do this. So as you see, this is generating a fair bit of pull requests, and what I built in N8N is an automation that checks these, and it will just automatically merge all of the applications that are safe to merge. And I'm using AI to determine this, of course. So when you look at the history of my PRs, then you will see that, for example, my audio bookshelf was updated automatically, and then there is an AI assessment report so that I can always check back. And here it will say this is a legitimate PR. It's a patch version update containing only bug fixes. So it decided that this was safe to merge automatically. This is a really cool system that is really reducing the maintenance workload that I have on my whole of my PRs. Then you will see that, for example, for research and for learning, makes it a little bit easier to read, but it is going to create a audio file out of this. And when I then click play here, this is what you hear. This is just a short section, but if I have like very long essays that I have my AI write for me, I track multiple things about my life and I store that in self-hosted databases. It's storing my sleep metrics, everything, and I'm gathering all of that myself in my own self-hosted data. HRV was trending down, and then I came out of it, and then things started to go better again. The same goes for my sleep. I have it all visible here in Grafana, and as you'll see, I've had a bit of a rough week with a few short nights here. I can consolidate all of this, and because it's in Grafana, I can also create alerting around this. So I literally have alerts that are going to start notifying me when, hey, your sleep is trending, gathering all of that. And if I go to my cluster and I run k get clusters A, then you will see I have multiple clusters running here, for example, Authentic and for JO. And I'm stuff that I teach to serve the audio. I don't necessarily want Amazon to know exactly what I'm listening to your disk, but audio bookshelf may some reason or other. You still have your copy of the podcast on your machine. I have taught thousands of people all over the world how to use the command line properly, and in this video I'm going to share the 5 CLI tools that have changed the way I work and have made me 10 times more productive. So let's go. The first tool I'm going to share is called FCF, which is a command line fuzzy finder, and this really changed the way how I work on the command line, both positively and negatively. So the way it works is if I am on the command line and let's say I'm in my Zettelkasten directory and I want to find a certain node, but I don't really know the exact title of it, right? So if I then do V and then Control T, then this is already going to show me a list of files that are in this directory. If I then start searching for Volkswagen, for example, then you can see on the top, there is the most matching result here. In this case, I'm looking for my Volkswagen California, my van. So if I do then press enter, it's going to complete the path of that file. And if I now press enter, I'm opening this file in Vim or NeoVim in this case. So this is how I can very easily search large directories and their subdirectories for any type of keyword, and it's fuzzies, right? So if I do V and then Kubernetes, then I'm going to see all of the stuff in Kubernetes. But let's say I'm looking for down there, I can see Kubernetes visualization. So Kubernetes viz, and then all of a sudden Kubernetes visualization is at the top here. Do you see? So it's actually super powerful. I can search my nodes like this. If I do Linux, then I see all of these Linux nodes that I have here. If I start searching for Python, then all of my Python nodes are here. Python expert, like it's so powerful that I can just search my nodes this way. And the second, obviously, if I SSH to a virtual machine at work, I don't have this available. So you should only start using this when you have mastered the history, the find, and the grab commands properly. Because if you are on a server somewhere and you're what you install on them, or Windows inside of your terminal window. Now, many terminal emulators like Westerm or iTerm and those things, they have like these little tabs in the top, etc. But that's completely unnecessary if you just use Tmux well. This is also why I like Alacrity. So the first concept in Tmux is a session. So if I do Tmux ls, then we'll see that I have 2 sessions running on this machine. A session is a collection of windows, and when you look at the top here, then you will see that there is only one window. This has all of the windows. If I want to create a new window, I press Ctrl B C and SSH. You will see that SSH is a program for logging into a remote machine and executing commands on a remote machine. Big deal, right? But the thing is that most people, they just literally use it only for logging in, and that's it. But there is a multi-year study you can do on SSH. Like, there's so many powerful things that you can do using SSH, and most mediocre engineers have never looked beyond just logging into somewhere. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that have completely changed the way I work, and maybe these will give you some inspiration to dig deeper into this command. So in its most basic fashion, SSH is used to log in on a remote machine. So in this case, I'm logging in as the user OBS on this host, which is a virtual machine running in Hetzner, which I'm reaching via Tailscale. So this could be, usually you would have an IP address here, but since I'm using Tailscale, I can use a fully qualified domain name here. So now I'm on the machine, and I am now on this remote machine. So if I do cat etc os release, then we see that I am now on a Ubuntu machine. And if I exit this and I run the same command, cat etc os release, we will see that I am on Fedora Linux. So that is the difference here. I'm opening a session, and now I'm suddenly on this remote machine. Now what's really nice is that I can actually run cat etc os release over SSH as a one-off command. So if I run this, I am now running this one command on the machine. I have Podman installed. If I do Podman ps, we see that there are no, and I don't have to mess around with local port forwarding and everything.
Phone always dying when you are out in the city? This pocket power bank
Kira kira! January snow begins to fall. February hear that sweet spring call. March and April colors bloom, dancing out of winter's gloom.
Need that perfect bang plucks afternoon pick-me-up at work? This white coffee is absolutely amazing. Tap below to grab
Walao, where is my ship ah? We fight so long
grab your packs
already? Still
today. Looking for a fun way to learn and play with your child? This
Twinkle, twinkle. Go through the year. Intro, soft claps and crisp. Neon lights on digital screens. Living out my pastel dreams.
Looking for a fun way to learn and play with your child? This magnetic maze toy is a total game changer. It is perfect for training concentration and logic. Tap below to get yours now. This is the mag hold, guaranteed to never fall off. We begin with the super suction mount. Now watch it snap. And now it usually works. Auntie, steady or not?
Gadgets you actually need. This lip gloss is fire. Watch this clean itself. Elevate your iced coffee. This patch actually works. This is the mag hold. Guaranteed to never fall off. We begin with the super suction mount. Now watch it snap. And now it usually works.
Check out my Ochaniko matcha. Get yours today.
Gadgets you actually need. This lip gloss is fire. Watch this clean itself. Elevate your iced coffee. This patch actually works. Gadgets you actually need. This lip gloss is gadgets you actually need. Check out these amazing products. This lip gloss is fire.
Try this coffee bundle.
This patch actually works. Click the link below. This is the super, and now we Check out these amazing products. This lip gloss is fire.
Try this coffee bundle.
This patch actually